The cosmos had corners where light never dared to linger, and other corners where stars bled like open wounds into the fabric of space. Between these extremes lived truths so large they made gods feel like children, the law that births and the law that ends. Galactus walked those laws like a slow, inexorable tide. He was not merely a being who ate planets. He was a necessity writ in energy and obligation. Once Galan of a vanished universe, remade by the collapse and rebirth of cosmos. He carried in his ribs the arithmetic of existence, conservation, balance, the careful ledger that prevented an entire reality from overheating or collapsing. To be Galactus was to be a cosmic accountant and a predator, a stomach for worlds that prevented a greater catastrophe. His hunger had purpose. His appetite meant continuity. Civilizations spat at his feet, and he answered with storms. Pantheons cursed his name and learned to bargain. He was terrifying, yes, but he was also the hinge on which a universe rotated. Unicron, by contrast, was a myth older than the word itself. He was not born of calculation, but of rupture, a yawning primeval that woke when the First Order tried to forge itself into a pattern. Where Primus shaped, Unicron undid. Where Galactus balanced, Unicron dissolved. He was not merely a devourer, he was an idea that ate. In some tellings, he was a machine animated by hunger. In others, a god of entropy with teeth of storm. Whatever the myth, his presence meant the collapse of meaning. Planets were prizes, yes, but more terrifyingly, they were languages that Unicron read and then erased. He did not preserve, he purged. He did not feed for survival. He fed to affirm oblivion. That was his morality, if morality could even be borrowed for him. And in that single, simple mandate, there was a terrible coherence. They never sought each other out like bereaved lovers. Fate, when it comes to Titans, prefers accident and inevitability over longing. Their orbits collided at the edges of a dead sector, where a star had long ago imploded into silence, and where neither hunger nor chaos had left much to feed upon. It was here that the cosmos held its breath, because the meeting of a necessity and an annihilator was not an event. It was a calculus with consequences. The smaller players, gods, heralds, and planets that still clung to petty lives, looked on like ants watching a landslide. Philosophers and priests felt their doctrines tremble. Some whispered that the universe itself might recalibrate if either titan fell. Both carried legacies of influence. Galactus had created heralds as extensions of his will, beings turned into agents of change who sang his needs across light years. Unicron birthed avatars of corruption, monarchs who were given the gift of revolt, Galvatron, devils who were once kings. The narratives that birthed those lieutenants were mirror images. One offered power as contract, the other offered power as release. Where Galactus bound his heralds with purpose and conditional mercy, Unicron bound his with wild promise and teeth. Each had its ecology of devotion and ruin. Together, the systems looked like a cosmic chessboard stacked with burning stars. The argument that would decide them began long before any fist struck. It had been whispered between comets and argued in the private dreams of supernal beings. Is existence sustained by the maintenance of balance, or is it defined by the capacity to unmake? Galactus embodied one side, an insistence that some structures must be preserved for others to be possible. Unicron embodied the other, the claim that meaning itself requires oblivion, that creation is only comprehensible against the backdrop of negation. This debate was not abstract. It had teeth and gravity, and would be decided in flesh and force. The first chapter of their collision was not war so much as orientation. Bodies aligning, histories unrolled, and positions taken. Each Titan listened, felt the other's signature like a scent. Galactus was methodical, mapping Unicron's chaos into variables. Unicron answered with patternless hunger, a terror that could not be fully described, but only endured. The stage was set, a philosophical duel coiled into a cosmic catastrophe, a series of propositions that would be argued with energy, will, and the slow, patient destruction of everything between them. They met as if the universe had misread a page of its own lawbook. Galactus arrived with the mantra of consumption translated into geometry, fields of power, cosmic unreeled in perfect lattices, coils that tried to capture the unruly, funnels that siphoned and rebalanced. His voice, when it spoke, was like a calculation made audible, formal, patient, stripped of melodrama. "I feed," he said, "so that more may be." It was not a plea but an axiom. His fingers, whole systems of physics condensed into limbs, extended to pluck at Unicron's circumference, to open veins in the Titan's outer shell, and test the flood of entropy that surged under the other's skin. Unicron answered with the simplest of truths. Ruin is not an error, but an act. He did not declaim poetry. He detonated it. His surfaces shifted from polished carbuncle to torn magnetic storms. Entire notions of solidity dissolved and reformed elsewhere. His mouth, a maw that could swallow continents, yawned, and the sound was a negation that bled into the fabric of causality. Where Galactus attempted to enclose and measure, Unicron unspooled and multiplied. Reality tore along seams and rewove into nightmares. Galactus's initial strikes were technicals, a harvesting of Unicron's energy to understand its architecture. He mapped shockwaves against probability matrices, set traps of resonant energy designed to bind the Chaos Bringer to a calculable domain. But each trap became an offering to Unicron's hunger. Rather than being contained, the Chaos found purchase and used Galactus's own structures as scaffolding. Between their clashing energies, argument became voice. It was a debate more ancient than the words either used. Galactus argued from necessity. Universes needed guardians. Unchecked annihilation meant entropy would metastasize into incoherent ruin, and that ruin would preclude any future. He spoke of cycles, of ecosystems of stars, and the awful math that said one cannot simply rip the cog out of an engine without shattering the whole machine. Unicron answered in kind but colder. Cycles were illusions, clinging to selfish survival. What Galactus called equilibrium was a denial of true becoming. If everything is conserved forever, then novelty is an act of theft. Destruction is the only honest creator because it clears old forms and allows new narratives to emerge from the ash. Creation is retrospective, Unicron said through the cracking of nebulae. You dress death in a suit of purpose to make it tolerable. They fought on multiple strata. At the surface, hulking blows dented metal and tore continents, each impact a planet-sized percussion that rearranged orbits. Below that, at the substructural level, they wrestled with the string and skein of causality. Galactus tried to sever Unicron's threads, cutting them into units he could study and subsume into his hunger. Unicron infected the simpler laws themselves, a virus that converted Galactus's harvest into seeds of further unmaking. Heralds and corrupted lieutenants were micro-battles within the greater war. Silver Surfer carved writs of light, trying to funnel the power cosmic into directed blasts. Galvatron's laughter echoed as structures fell away into babble. The decisive moment was neither a strike nor a calculation, but a philosophical pivot executed as kinetic inevitability. Galactus, in the arrogance of his role, treated Unicron as a problem to be solved. If he could analyze the Chaos Bringer's pattern, he could convert that energy into the very thing that sustained him. He began siphoning, pulling Unicron's entropy into his own inflamed core. For a time, it seemed logical. The power cosmic condensed the raw collapse into structured energy, a harvest so brilliant it would have fed 1,000 galaxies. Unicron, however, anticipated the vector not by intelligence alone, but by being a being whose identity was the reversal of the act Galactus performed. Where Galactus sought to convert chaos into ordered sustenance, Unicron converted order into material for annihilation. As Galactus drew, Unicron inverted the intake. the siphoned entropy became a mirror. Energy that had been structured by Galactus's intent reasserted itself as a corrupting principle within the Devourer. Galactus felt the sensation worst suited to him, the consuming of his own reasons. The power cosmic, once a tool, turned into a wound. With every pound of planetary power he ingested, Unicron's essence wormed deeper, a parasite of meaning that rewrote the purpose behind the hunger. Now, the philosophical debate became viciously literal. Galactus screamed, not because of pain, but because his justifications, balance, necessity, protection, were being eaten from within. Unicron whispered that purpose is a cage, and that to be freed of purpose is to be authentic. The whispers multiplied into reality fractures. Stars blinked out, not because they were devoured physically, but because the meaning that held them together was peeled away. Civilizations that had once worshipped to bind their lives into meaning found their faiths collapsing into silence. Galactus tried to recalibrate, to isolate the corruption and excise it. He attempted to externalize the infection, to use heralds as purging flames. But each purge fed Unicron more context to consume and rewrite. Galactus's intellect, once an unerring compass, began to spin. He faced an epistemic infection. If his purpose could be unmade, then his justification for existence might crumble, and with that crumble his authority to sustain the cosmic ledger. In the rawest ledger entry of cosmic truth, Unicron's victory was becoming plausible, because he was not merely stronger, he was ontologically asymmetric. Galactus operated under the rule, consume to preserve. Unicron operated under a different rule, devour to redefine. When Galactus tried to apply his conservationist logic to Unicron's multiversal chaos, he found his principles collapsing like scaffolds in a hurricane. The battlefield shifted into a quieter, grimmer realm. There, at the core of both beings' identities, they argued without words. Galactus, stripped of rhetorical armor, tried to hold on to the image of himself as necessary. Unicron, patient and indifferent, supplied counterexamples. Universes where balance calcified into stagnation, where Galactus's maintenance had allowed abuses and monstrous orders to ossify. The argument cut both ways, and in the marrow of the Devourer, it did what Unicron could not do by force alone. It seeded doubt. For the first time since the birth of his present self, Galactus feared not death, but irrelevance, the possibility that his hunger was a superstition the cosmos no longer required. Unicron needed not just to overpower Galactus physically, but to transform the meaning of the Devourer's existence. He injected stories into Galactus's perception, visions of a cosmos that welcomed the clean slate of annihilation, galaxies that pulsed brighter once their old myths were scrubbed. These were not lies. They were probabilities that Unicron made manifest by destroying the counterweights. As Galactus watched the ripple of alternative histories, worlds that could be remade from extinction, he felt the old equations lose their force. The power cosmic could not armor him against a loss of conviction. Without conviction, his will thinned, and with it, his control over the structures he had placed. In the end, the final collapse happened incrementally and philosophically, not with a single decisive blow, but with the slow folding of reason into void. Unicron's essence did not merely tear Galactus apart. It turned his purpose into an offering and devoured that offering. Where Galactus had once been a force that kept entropy from racing, he became, paradoxically, the vehicle through which entropy spread. The power cosmic, overloaded and rewritten, fed the chaos bringer. Galactus's heralds, his instruments, became the instruments of his undoing as their light was reshaped into corrosive songs that sang planets into oblivion. When the dust of collapsing meaning settled, there was a silence that was not peaceful, but final. Galactus, the devourer who had once kept cosmic balance with the clinical gaze of a scientist priest, lay unwound, not because Unicron had simply been stronger in a tit-for-tat, but because Unicron had attacked the one thing Galactus guarded above all, the sanctity of purpose. The victory was philosophically coherent. Unicron did not need to brute force the laws of physics so much as reframe the metaphysical contract that bound those laws. He showed through action that preservation as an absolute is an ideology susceptible to entropy. He demonstrated that a force that can erase meaning can also redirect agency, turning the conservator into an unwitting agent of negation. That outcome is ugly and honest. If Galactus represents the argument that life requires, custodianship, that some things must be eaten so others may live, then Unicron represents the counter-argument that meaning itself is not immune to dissolution, and that the ultimate arbiter is not balance but possibility born from absence. In their clash, Unicron proved the more devastatingly coherent claimant. His mode of being allowed him to convert the systems of preservation into fodder for oblivion. He did not merely win a fight. He enacted a proof by annihilation that certain logics lose when confronted with a force that can unmake the very categories they rely upon. So Unicron stood, not just triumphant in the way a conqueror stands over a battlefield, but triumphant in the way an idea triumphs when it collapses the assumptions that opposed it. Galactus's body, or what remained of it, glowed with the last of the power cosmic before being folded and folded until even its memory was indistinct. The universe shifted. Some would call it tragic, others necessary. The raw truth is simpler. Unicron ate what held Galactus together. That was never merely a tactical victory. It was a metaphysical one.